21. For consideration on our agenda tonight, there are 8 of them. We added an addendum yesterday, so we now have 8 instead of 7. Just a housekeeping item, if this meeting runs past 6:30, we'll have a hard stop on this meeting at 6:40 PM, because I have a conflicting meeting at 7 o'clock. So hopefully we can get all of our work done in the time that we have. Oh, and the Public Works Director is here, so we won't shift his report. You're fine. So then item number 1 on our agenda, we'll take them in order, is the Director's report from Public Works, and he has quite a few items to talk with us about tonight, so we'll turn it over to Eric.
So if anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those, either myself or Alan or TJ. You know, I tried to go over some of the highlights on what's been happening over the last month, from the environmental side of things to the fleet facility project, where we're at with the consultant, the mall site, and then what is now proposed for the Washington Street improvements for 2021. They have changed a bit at this point. Rather than changing that to two-way traffic this year, we had plans and everything for that. That was a costly project, so rather than doing that, we're going to just provide some parking on the south side of Washington Street for the businesses and stuff in the interim. Eventually, Washington Street will go to two-way traffic once the development starts and begins. Yes, sir?
I have a question on item 3.
Yeah.
And it says you're looking at 3 separate properties.
Is your mic on? Oh, just so they can get
You're
you on.
looking for 3 separate properties. Could you give the addresses of those properties, please?
Yep, sure can. One of them was 1300 Cleveland Avenue. The other one is a series of properties down by DPW right now, along Myron Street, I believe. And then the other property is actually at the DPW site. Yeah, so those are the 3 properties that we're
My
looking at.
question is what would it take to take 1300 Cleveland Avenue off the list? And I say that because, you know, Eric, you and I off the record, when I first got elected to this council, I said 1300 Cleveland Avenue would be a good spot for it. And you said, no, at the time you said no. You know, we're staying right where we're at. Well, since that time, so many things have changed that I believe at this time that 1300 Cleveland Avenue needs to be removed from that list simply because we as a city council, just a few months ago, we rezoned that property residential. And you know, if we need to stay focused on what we did as a council to leave that zoned residential and take that off. And not only that, is, you know, when we're in the midst of environmental justice, setting up an ordinance for that, we need to, you know, start walking the walk and not put any more environmental injustices in that area until that land is remediated to residential standards. And so with that, the city attorney isn't here today, so,
Nate is here.
Oh, Nate is here, so I guess my question is what do we need to do to take this off? It's not actually an agendized item, so.
It's not, so we don't take action on the report, so, but I guess we'll let Eric respond, and then Deb has a question.
Well, actually, I'm not through.
Okay, then go ahead.
So, what my question is if it's not an agendized item, then perhaps at the end of the meeting, I could make a motion to put it as an agendized item so we could put it up for a vote, because for the previous reasons I just stated.
Okay,
Or maybe Nate could answer how this needs to be done so we can put this up for discussion or debate to get this off the city's radar.
Well, at first blush, if you're looking to put some type of restrictions on the use of a site that's city-owned, I would think that that happens in the
I'm
economic
not looking
development.
for any restrictions. I'm looking to get this off the city's radar because this is zoned residential. We as a council, just a few months ago, had a rather robust debate to make this residential. You know, are we going to stay focused on our goal of keeping this residential, or are we going to be manipulated by city or other businesses that want to put stuff on this site after we've flat out told 3M and Colby, you know, this is zoned residential now. You know,
Well, in this committee, we don't have the authority to put any sort of use restrictions on a parcel of land. So, I mean, we're getting this information as a director's report as far as where they're at with the planning of a capital project. So we can't do it here.
so then where do we do it? I guess is my question.
So-
Because this needs to be taken off the
Well-
city's
If I-
radar.
If I could just make a comment that
Yeah,
might
go
clear
ahead,
it up.
Eric.
So at council next week, that facility plan and feasibility study is on the council agenda, which includes 1300 Cleveland. So I would think that the council, if they don't want to consider 1300 Cleveland, they could vote to have that removed from that feasibility study. So I
Okay, so
think
that will be on the agenda for next week's
it
council.
is on the agenda, yes,
Okay.
for next week.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Deb.
I guess I just kind of wanted to talk about it as well, that, and Nate, you may want to come back. In regard to CISM as a committee, I mean, we're looking at the different options as such, but that I thought as a committee, we could make a recommendation and at a certain point in a future meeting when it's agendized, to say that we are not interested, we want to keep it as residential and to look at other alternatives. And I guess part of that is in prior meetings, I had mentioned about, are we looking at potential other dealerships that are vacant, that already have the lifts and the garage and the space, that they may have gone to a larger size lot, but a smaller dealership might have the additional lifts and the space, that we could end up having maybe two options for places for vehicles to be, and maybe one of them as they're on the outskirts of town. Now, I know like at Grand Avenue and Lakeview Drive, that has become taken, but it just seemed to me, okay, that's near our boundaries.
Right, but keep in mind that any facility that gets built has to be able to turn in a circular radius a full-sized fire engine, including that aerial. And so if you're looking at existing facilities that worked on passenger cars, that needs an awful lot of land to get them in the back door and out the front door. So the plan that we have from Barrientos is very different from a car dealer's garage. So, but we don't want to get way afield off of our agenda item, but the CISM committee looks at capital projects in the context of infrastructure. So we pick the street projects that get built into the budget, and then, you know, assuming they don't get cut, they all go forward. If they get cut, they don't go forward. And that, you know, we then consider different ones for the following year, or we bring back the old ones. But the fleet facility is a capital project, a 2022 capital project that was ranked by the Capital Improvements Committee. That's where that gets managed. So then that committee, which also contains citizen members, prioritizes the requests, and then that recommendation goes to finance to be incorporated into the 2022 budget. So this committee does not reselect or cherry pick the CIP committee's recommendations. That all happens in finance. We don't have that authority here.
Okay, I guess one other question, just in regard to the prior fire station. I'm wondering, you know, second thoughts, would we have been better to have saved it and used it for additional auto and fire truck repair. It fit the fire trucks.
Well, it didn't, and that's why it had to be rebuilt. When the new engines were put inside, you could barely shut the door, and when you shut the door, you couldn't walk in front of the door. So we took the council on a tour of Fire Station number 2, and the engine in the building with the door shut, an average-sized person could not get between, let alone work on it. And so that's part of the reason that the bays were inadequate for their equipment, let alone everything else. And that was a normal fire engine, that wasn't even an aerial. So we had all kinds of problems, but, so we're way off of our agenda item, which is
Okay.
Eric's report.
Okay.
Tom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for being unavoidably late. I just want to very quickly remind everybody about the robust discussions that we did have about the property at Cleveland. And the reasons behind those discussions were specifically, and we talked about it a lot, related to remediation of pollution there, stuff in the ground. And we stated, and I've stated numerous times in those discussions, that doesn't mean that, we went to that zoning, residential zoning, not for the sole purpose of putting in residential development there, but for the purpose of achieving residential level remediation, regardless of what might end up going there. And that is on public record. It's been said many times, and I think that we, from a zoning standpoint, this isn't the zoning commission, need to stick with that and have that, because that was what, in good faith, was determined for the good of the neighborhood. Not that there will never be a service facility there, or a garage there, or anything of that nature there, even a production facility of some kind. As long as it adhered to all guidelines. The main push of everything we talked about was to clean up the land so that people that lived around it wouldn't have to worry about dust or runoff and that sort of thing. That is what is on public record. That's what we have voted on, and we have to stick with it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that the garage can't go there.
Right, and I think, and then the same thing with studying the feasibility of the site. Maybe they will find it doesn't work at all, logistically. But if it does, the subsequent steps to make that fit all come through the Common Council. So, but with that, I guess, do you have anything on the fleet facility, Nate, at all, or, okay.
No.
Then we can, are we good on that topic? We have Eric go down to the mall site then? Go ahead.
Two other things on the director's report.
Okay.
I guess Lisa had mentioned at the finance briefly that there is some vacancies that would be in regard to the hot mix for roads. And I guess I couldn't tell by these titles if any of these positions were in that regard that we're low on. And that, I guess I would like to see some part-time people that would be recruited for, especially for snow and snow plowing in the winter, that it could be something, I don't know if we could have an additional raise because it's strictly on a part-time basis, but that with, still the effects of COVID, that we need to have adequate people to be doing the snow plowing. And at a certain point, if some staff are doing 18-hour shifts, there's a higher risk of accidents or something happening. So I'm just hoping we can find out more details about what staff, and that I do think more hot mix and those kind of upgrades annually is the way to go if we have very limited funds on about doing a whole road replacement. Thank you.
I share your concern about winter maintenance, given the fact that they've got as many shortages as we see on the report. I think that the number one problem isn't going to be too many hours or accidents. It's going to be that routes don't get done when people expect them to be done, and then phones will be a-ringing. So, that's the trouble we're going to have. I think we're going to have to manage the expectations in our neighborhoods, because I think people are going to see a dip in service compared to what they're used to, and they were already complaining last year. And so that's a concern that I shared with you last night in finance, that I feel like I also think they're going to struggle to hire part-time people if they can't hire full-time people. Because the full-time person makes a higher salary and full benefits, and they can't even get a person to do that job, let alone somebody that wants to do it maybe 6 hours a day. And it's a weird schedule. I mean, it's really inconsistent for people that do it. If you don't work there full-time and then you're on call, that's the worst possible schedule you could give a person, because you wait till it snows and then they come to work. So I guess, can you run through the vacancies a little bit, Eric, and let us know what winter might look like?
Yeah, so right now, what we're looking at is down 4 plow routes, possibly 5. And, with that, we have 26 plow routes, if I remember correctly. So then we're down to 21. So those routes that would typically take on an average snowfall 8 hours, it's an additional 40 hours of plowing that has to be absorbed with the other routes. And so, most people we'll take care of our main carrier routes and things like that initially to get people to work and stuff, and then we'll go into the residences. But what we don't like to do is have our drivers on the street more than 16 hours at a time, because they get tired. It's exhausting. There's a higher risk of accidents, those types of things. So, and we don't have backup drivers. And so once they kind of get to that point, we pull them off the street, send them home to get some rest, and then we'll bring them back. So the reality is, with this many vacancies, and then if we have people out on medical or people on vacations that were already scheduled and stuff, we may have delays in actually getting into some of the residential areas until the following day, which is typically not the case. And so that level of service, may be diminished going through this winter. And depending on how bad the winter is, that could be catastrophic too. Yeah. So.
I guess I'm concerned because with a significant snow event, we're going to have problems getting people around where they need to go. And I think that we are going to immediately be met with, comments from our residents, which wouldn't necessarily be wrong, to claim that with the tax rate they pay, they expect certain services. And so you can't just magically produce people to do the work. You have the people that you have. And so that's a problem. I think we're going to have to manage people's expectations and, do a good job of communicating on the front end that some people may wait an entire day for their road to become passable. And so people that don't have four-wheel drive, that's going to be a culture shock for them because they're not used to that. I mean, I've had people that if they're not plowed out by 7 p.m. the day after the snow, they're upset. If that takes till the next morning, it's going to even be worse. And so on, seldom traveled streets where people still live, I think we're going to have an awful lot of complaints. So that's a problem. I guess with the positions that are open, and this might be something where we may need to make a recommendation for analysis to the HR committee. Is the problem with the recruitment based in the wage scale? Because, we did a wage study a number of years ago, and, they compare those positions to the private sector, or as close as they can come to the private sector. And, we implemented the wage study, so we got everybody to the midpoint. And I get the fact that if we raise the introductory pay, we're going to create compression for the folks that have been there for a while. But at some point, the inadequate facility can't be the only reason people aren't coming to work there. And so whether it's the salary, whether it's the workplace culture, whether it's the environment, we need to know what that problem is. And if it's fixable, maybe we need to have HR take a look at what we pay those folks. Or, if we need to implement some kind of signing bonuses, I don't know where we go, but we have major trouble ahead with, if we don't have a winter like last winter, I feel like we have trouble ahead. Mayor?
Yeah, so I think that's a good idea, is to talk about this at HR. I think it's important. One of the things we're talking about as a region is talent attraction and retention. And one of the stats that kind of blew my mind was that we have more job openings right now in the area, not just at Wausau, but in our whole area, than we have high school graduates that are coming through. So it's a problem. We need people moving here.
Right. Maybe what I'll do is I'll reach out to the HR chair and ask her to get with the HR director and do some analysis as to what the exact source of the problem with recruitment and retention is on street maintainer specifically. We kind of know that part of it in mechanic is there's nowhere for people to work and the environment's not conducive, but street maintainer, that's the same in an awful lot of municipalities. And I don't know if everybody has these troubles, but if we have it worse than other people, maybe we got to do something different. So
I think with our skilled labor force, we've been running into this probably for 2 years now. And it's recruitment, I think we can do better on. Retention seems to be more of a significant issue. And so we are losing people due to wage. And I also think that, the way our wage structure is, we're losing people because it takes them a very long time to get to market rate. And so, if they get hired because they have minimal experience, it takes them 8+ years to get to market. So even if they're fully proficient in their position after 4 years, they have another 4+ years to get to in today's market anyway, and any adjustments into that scale over that time pushes that even further. So what has happened is we just lost 2 people on the utility side too over the last month due to this. That they've been with us almost 2 years, both of them. And then, of course, we've trained them and put them through a lot of things. And of course, they were taking positions elsewhere because of
And they were
their
making more
skills.
money.
Yes. Yep.
And that's a huge problem, because then what we're doing is investing an awful lot of time, money, and effort into training other people's employees.
Yep.
And so we're essentially providing, free training to
Right.
all of these communities where people are going, and that's just not fair.
Yeah.
And so I would like HR to commence, whether it starts out as an internal study or whatever, they've got to figure this out. And if it's the
there
money
is-
part,
yeah.
finance can find some money, but
There is a discussion on HR for Monday, to begin the discussions. I saw that.
Okay.
I think Tony and Becky had put something on there. I believe that's correct, right, Mayor? With that discussion.
Okay.
I'll be writing a memo for them as well.
excellent. And if that yields the fact that it's a funding issue, I would be more apt to consider a fix for problems like this than looking at something else they have on their agenda for Monday, which is full implementation of option 3, which affects 14 people. So, I mean, that said, I guess we need to know in here and in finance what the fix looks like. And so if they can figure that out, we can certainly have future conversations. With regard to the director's report, anything else, Luke?
Thank you. I have one more item. And first of all, I want to thank you for taking action on item 8, because I really think that stretch of street, that as you saw, that divot in the street, that not only can cause damage to our city vehicles because we use that, but if you were even to do the speed limit, it could cause serious damage. Do you have any time frame as to when this is going to get scoped and
I think Alan's been working with DPW, and we're trying to get the camera over there. I think it might be the sewer utility that'll bring their camera over. And so I don't know, I don't have a schedule on that yet for that storm sewer, Lou.
So you think it is the storm sewer that's caving in?
Well, I think at least we need to investigate it to see if we rule it out or if that's actually the issue.
And is there, and even if it's something that can't be refixed or budgeted, is there some way you could level that out by possibly throwing some fill over those divots and perhaps a blacktop patch over that? Once you find out what the problem is.
Yeah.
I think we want to make sure there's nothing, underneath the pavement creating that we're losing soil. But yeah, once we eliminate that, we can put a patch on it and fix that.
Thank
Tom,
you.
go ahead, Tom.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, but I'm called away.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay.
Yep, not to worry. All right. Anything else on the director report? Oh, go ahead, welcome. Alder Killian, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make this real quick. I just have a question on the number 2 for Mr. Lindman, the Cleveland Ave testing. Do you know, has the city or GEI received the raw lab data results from that second round of testing yet?
I have not heard from them that they have, and
Okay.
I have not checked with them this week, Tom, so.
Okay, thank you. And then the second thing was, it was just in response to older Neil's comment, I would say that my recollection is identical, that I think that no matter what goes on that site, we had essentially provided an informal assurance to the community that it would be cleaned up to non-industrial standards. So I think it's important that whatever happens in the future, that that word from the city is honored and we fulfill that social contract, so to speak. Thank you.
I agree. I think, we all along wondered if that site was good for anything or good for nothing. And, we also, I think, as robust as the testing has been, I think the fix needs to be the same level of robustness, whatever's in there. So, so with that, we can place the director's report on file if we're done with those items. That will move us then to the consent agenda. That we have 3 items on there. It's approval of the minutes of the August 12th meeting, action on authorizing downtown snow and ice removal, and an action on an easement with Green Acres at Greenwood Hills LLC at 3115 Town Line Road. Is everyone okay with taking those items as a group? And is there a motion then to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Larson, is there a second? Second by Ryan. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, and then all those items carry. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on creating 2-hour parking stalls on Mcinduce Street between North 5th Street and North 4th Street. And it looks like we have a request from the Marathon County Historical Society for Mary Forer over there, who's looking for a little bit of parking in front of their facility now that Mcinduce has way less traffic. So Alan has this one, right? You've looked at this thing and it didn't seem...
Right. Like you had said, I'd gotten contacted by Mary Forer at the Historic Society requesting, I went and took a look at it, and obviously if this was still State Highway 52 or the truck turning movement around would probably not be ideal. But I think we can, I'd like to mark them actually, not just post, just to define the stall so people get used to possibly cars parking there.
Right.
And I'd also probably put some diagonal marking up to the stalls and cross hatching just to move traffic over, because your natural inclination when you turn from 5th onto Mcinduce stay far to the right, but I think we push people over with pavement marking. Those 3 stalls should be fine there.
Okay. Questions for Alan? If not, go ahead, Jim.
How many stalls would we be installing? How safe would it be with that short, fast corner that people were used to going before? And if we do it, should we do it down to 3rd?
The request was not, there's no parking the rest of the way to also, but there wouldn't really be any room for the rest of the way to 4th because there's the driveway there and then the intersection. So this is really the only spot in this block where we could put stalls. There was no request in the down to 3rd, but you're right, that is also no parking between 3rd and 4th.
So the stalls are far enough west that with the pavement markings you described, we should be able to control the flow coming off of the corner there at the triangle?
Right, what I would do is mark diagonals with some cross hatching to move the traffic over. And like I said, if it was still State Highway 52 with trucks going around there, I would not recommend it. But based on the fact it's a residential street now, that, where you had UT into 3rd Street, I think we give it a try.
Okay. Well, and it
How
would
many
serve...
stalls?
3.
3? And it would serve the museum and the Historical Society essentially in that spot, so... Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the 3 stalls? Motion by Larson. Is there a second? Second by Ryan. Further discussion? Nate? Come on up.
Should have came up just a little earlier. So
okay.
we'll have to add these then to an ordinance,
Yes.
to our ordinance amendment. And so in the council packet, you'll
Okay.
have the actual ordinance resolution.
Perfect. With the ordinance numbers and,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Perfect. We've gotten ahead of ourselves before where we realized we had all kinds of parking restrictions that aren't in the code. So good that you picked that out. We'll get it all done at one time. So with a motion and a second on the floor, then members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. Motion carries. Item number 4 is to discussion and possible action on approving a street to be considered for community development block grant funding for next year. It looks like we may have some funding for one street for next season, and it looks like Alan is recommending Torney Avenue.
Yes, so there is a possibility for CDGB funding. I mean, we never know the limits of the funding, but those hearings are coming up here in the end of September, so we need we need to apply for those funds and go to the hearing and make our case for those funds, and then that committee decides whether they want to give funding to street reconstruction or not, if the funding becomes available. Now, as you can see, I included the LMI mapping, which shows that this section of Torney is in the purple, and you can see there's a 70.23. So it is in an area that qualifies. One of the higher areas, I guess, that would qualify. Torney was on the list. If you remember, we had a list last year. Torney was on that list. It was not chosen. I think one of the reasons I chose it, it's obviously, it has several factors kind of went into it in my mind. It's got a beginning and an end. You know, there's Town Line and there's McDonald. I'm not saying there's several other blocks. There's hundreds of blocks in the city that could be reconstructed, but you know, you have a beginning and an end here. It's not like you're doing one block of a 6-block street or something like that, which is very inefficient.
Right, so you'd have a complete project with
Correct.
this, okay.
And Torney's a narrow street, which makes your money go further because there's not as much asphalt. And there's a small amount of the lot frontage is narrow. So one of the things that CDGB looks at is the number of residents that are impacted. So on this stretch of Torney, you can see the number of lots that would be impacted.
There's quite a few homes there.
Correct, so, and about 60, there are some of the lead services that have been replaced, but the majority would have lead services, so that would be another reason there'd be a significant amount of lead services changed out with this project, so that was kind of my reasoning for picking Torney. It's also rated as a 3, which is one of the lowest rated, you know.
Sure.
There aren't any 2s, so it's like it's tied with a bunch of other streets for the lowest rating in the city.
And block grant, basically, if we were to invest it, substantially reduces the assessment for the homeowner, right?
There are no assessments when
No
we use
assessment,
block
okay.
grant, correct?
So with the sewer and water cost, are they assessed for that though, or not?
No, they don't,
Okay.
they don't receive any assessment costs.
So only if they decide to replace their own driveway approach, right? I mean, I thought they still had some payment. No?
No.
So.
I mean,
so-
if they do work beyond the city's project, yes, but
okay.
not,
So we could cover it all, really? for them?
correct. Well,
Okay.
the sewer and water utility still has to cover the sewer and the water.
Sure.
CDGB funds do not cover sewer and water, so the utility still has their costs.
Okay. Jim?
Would with this reconstruction, do we know yet if it would still have the narrow sidewalks and no curbs?
There's sidewalk right along the back of the curb. It's a narrow right-of-way, so we don't have a lot of room to do much there. So it would probably go back pretty much the way it is.
Okay, that makes sense.
We don't have a lot of room to do much else.
If only. Lou?
I would make the motion that we go ahead with this project because as Alan said last year, we chose Mcinduce Street over this last year. And I've traveled up this, and I've traveled on this street, and it is in dire need of
bad.
repair. And it could have easily been chosen last year, but I recommended Mcinduce Street because it was a truck route and it was just as direly needed. So I'm going to make the motion that we accept this
Okay.
and we go ahead with this project.
Do we have a
should
second
we get
for
the
Lou's
funding.
motion? Second by Wadinsky. Deb, you have a comment?
Yes, I recently talked to a neighbor about roads in the area, and this is probably more for the parks area, but that his point was that, you know, with a lot of the trees that are being on the boulevard, they eventually grow to the point where they're, you know, affecting the sidewalks with their roots and that. And so maybe it's something within the Parks Department that will look at potentially, you know, reducing the number of trees being planted in a certain area so that we can kind of reduce those other costs that end up happening because of
Does this street
trees.
have boulevard and
It
street
does
trees?
not.
It does not.
It does not have
Okay.
boulevards. The
Oh,
street does not
good.
have boulevards.
Okay, it looked like
It's that
it-
narrow that,
It didn't look like it had anything green on the map, so
Okay.
I think we're ahead of it on that. Anything else from anyone? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, so that is approved for next year. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on establishing assessment rates for the 2022 construction projects. And you'll recall, every year we set this. This is the rate per foot that we charge people for various things. And it looks like, Alan, your recommendation is that we keep the same rate?
Right, that's, I guess this committee can choose to do, raise it, but based upon, feedback from people, obviously they don't want to see their assessment rate go up, and I think given that, it'd probably be a tough sell right now to raise those assessments, but we don't know where prices will be in '22. In '21, they went up a little bit. Who knows where they'll be at in '22, but I think we keep the rate what we're at now at $42 per foot.
I think that makes sense to at least give us another year to kind of have people claw their way out of the pandemic before we start ramping up costs. Jim, go ahead.
Since my street is not on target to be repaired, I'll make a motion that we approve this.
We have a motion by Wadinsky to
I'll
approve.
second.
Second by Larson. Further discussion? Members in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 6, discussion and possible action on an easement with Wausau Opportunity Zone at 301 Washington Street. This is the easement to add the angle parking that Eric was talking about in his report. Anybody have questions on that? Jim?
So is this a temporary easement just for this project? Or is this going to easement to entail the eventual finished project down the road?
No, you're correct, this would just be for the temporary situation with the parking. The permanent right-of-way, when the road gets reconstructed, would be dedicated to the city. This is just to put this parking in for the short term.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the parking or the easement? Motion by Larson, second by Wadinsky. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 7 is construction update for 2021 projects. And there are a few. Right at the top of the list is good old Third Avenue. It's still horrible if anyone's interested. Go ahead, TJ.
Unfortunately, Third Avenue is still on the list and continues to be our problem for the foreseeable future. We're looking at a completion date of hopefully early October, possibly stretching out into the second week of October. Curb was completed on the north section of Third Avenue, and then they did the Randolph intersection. We're trying to emphasize that area for the school crossings. And then for the phase 2 from Randolph to Clayton, they're working on the water and sewer services, which will bring them through next week. Progress is being made, but it's slow.
With regard to the Clayton to Boss Creek stretch that they've been at since April, do they at least have road base in there that people can get in and out of their driveways and it's not mud anymore?
Yes.
Okay,
That
so,
road is, all that's left is some fine tuning, bringing in a little bit more gravel to the depth of the curb.
okay, and then first layer of pavement.
Correct.
That would be a huge plus. I can tell you that the school and the school parents are pretty upset. That continues. And I learned yesterday that apparently part of the reason for the 5-week delay was that Jake took a state project and left ours sit. And so that said, in the off-season, before we get to the 2022 construction season, I would like us to take a look in this committee at what we charge for liquidated damages to make sure that it's enough that we're taken seriously. Because if they fail the Department of Transportation, they pay something like 10 grand a day. And that makes our measly $1,000 a day look like small potatoes. And I also would like us to take a look at the fines that we are able to levy in terms of amounts for street privilege permits when plumbers dig up the street and leave the hole sit for 6 months. So I asked Eric and TJ and Alan to look at that for our off-season, and before we get too far down the road with 2022, I think that we need some more teeth in their toolbox, so that they can get stuff like this taken care of, because if what I heard about Jake's is true, 5 weeks that project sat on hot sunny days and nothing happened. So that's completely unacceptable on any street, doesn't matter where people live, so, full penalties for that guy. That might be the third month I've said that, but publicly, full penalties for that guy. So then we have Fifth and from West to Garfield, is that next?
That's correct, yep. So both the next two projects are complete. Fifth was paved this week. Rosecrans was paved last week. I think, we had struggles with any major reconstruction, but, we worked through them, and I think both those projects turned out really well.
Good deal.
McIntosh Street is underway right now. They're working on the sanitary services and the sanitary manhole replacements. We're looking at a mid-October completion date. And then the last project is the Whistout Bridge repairs. The only one still going underway is on Grand Avenue, and they're just doing some painting up there.
Nice.
Yep. One more project that is going to start next week that was not on the list was the concrete rehab project is going to start. And that's the joint replacements and the shallow depth. That is scheduled this year for First Avenue from Bridge to Knox. And then, or is that, whatever street goes around the corner?
Union.
Union, there we go, thank you. And then parts of Union, and then also First Street downtown here, in front of the eye clinic, we'll be getting some repairs. So those, we have the pre-con tomorrow, and they are scheduled to start next Wednesday. So I'll be getting a traffic bulletin out for that, and it'll be about a month worth of repairs on those two streets.
And just lane closures here and there for parts of that then, or?
Correct, the
Okay.
traffic will remain, First Avenue will be just down to one lane of traffic.
Okay. All right, anybody have questions on those projects or any of the updates? Okay, that report then we put on file, and that brings us to item number 8, which is an addendum, discussion and possible action on an easement with Wisconsin Public Service at 1801 Burrick Avenue. This is an easement to get utilities into the water plant. Does anyone have questions for Eric on that one? If not, is there a motion to approve the easement? Motion by Ryan, is there a second? They exchanged looks. Second by Larson, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. And that brings us to our adjournment. We made it in 45 minutes, so we did good. With that, our next meeting is the second Thursday of October. At our November meeting coming up, we will have an analysis of how the summer went with our parklets. I actually got a request. Parklets, remember the parklet that we put up downtown? So we were gonna let them finish the season and then talk about how it went. And I just gotten an email recently from Blake over at Main Street asking when we would talk about it. And I said, well, let's finish the season and then do it. So I have that planned for the November meeting, that we'll talk about how.
I went down to all the concerts on the square, and it looked like it was very well receptive and very well used.
Yeah, it did, and it's aesthetically, it's really nice. The flowers and stuff on it look great, and there is only one. I thought maybe we'd have a couple of them when we approved them, but the one was certainly getting used, so.
I mean, if you're gonna shut that street off, this is off the record, I think.
For the well, I suppose we could adjourn and have that conversation, but let's do that because we're way off our agenda, so I'll take a motion to adjourn first. Motion by Larson, is there a second? Second by Wadinsky. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Nobody ever is. We'll stand adjourned then, thanks everyone.